Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battishill, and I want to know, what's your next move? Hey there, I'm Arlene Battishill, your host and resident provocateur, and today's episode we're going to be doing something a little different. I guess you could consider it a live coaching episode, where we have an entrepreneur that's joining us today, and the entrepreneur is Jennifer Sobel, and she is struggling with something that she's working on right now and isn't sure what to do next. So we're going to see whether or not we can help her figure out what her next move is. So Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Arlene. I'm thrilled to be a part of your podcast and get your help and guidance.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So why don't you talk about what you're doing right now, just in general, and then clue us in as to what it is that you're struggling with right now.
Sure. So currently I am a digital marketer, and I'm also a professional belly dancer. And I've done many things in my professional career. I've been an acupuncturist, I've been a personal trainer, and now I do digital marketing. I've always owned my own businesses, but the thing that has been the through line through everything, the thing that I've done the longest has been the belly dancing. I've been doing it professionally for 14 years, and it's my greatest passion. So it's always been the thing that I've done on the side.
Basically, what you have is an avocation that you are trying to turn into something that's going to generate a sustainable source of revenue for you. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I'm really at this place where I feel like I've kind of come full circle, because I learned, all of this digital marketing, and I'm doing it now in my own business. And now I'm looking towards, okay, how can I apply what I do for my clients with my belly dancing? But the question mark that I've always had is, just because it's my passion, does that mean that it could be lucrative? And I'm kind of stuck because I don't know how to evaluate that. I don't know if it's viable financially.
So we just have to get straight into this. And that has to do with identifying whether or not there's actually a market for what you have to offer. And so we have to look at, what is it that you would like to be offering?
So, I have done research at different times into this market. And for example, looking at how many people are searching for belly dance related things on Google each month. And it looks like a lot of the market is with people searching for buying belly dance related items. But for example, I've also seen on ClickBank people doing, or actually just one person doing a belly dance instructional program. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of video tutorials on my YouTube channel, and I haven't been consistent with it. And I do know that there's a lot of people belly dancers on YouTube that have, hundreds of thousands of followers. So I feel like there could be a potential market for creating something instructional, but I don't know if that market is big enough. And I don't know if it's worthwhile me putting the time into it.
Right. Okay. Well, my initial thought is, don't be dissuaded by the fact that you're seeing people who are doing belly dancing related stuff, whether it's instructional or demonstration, and them having lots and lots of followers, because let's be blunt about this. You talking about women who don't have a lot of clothing on and people watching them dancing, you're going to have a big following. There's just no two ways about that. So you should not be discouraged by the fact that these people have lots and lots of followers, because my guess is they are mostly men who are interested in watching women dancing. And so don't use that as your measure of the likelihood that there is a market for this.
Right.
And with respect to the clothing that you referenced of, that there are people who are advertising this product or that people are doing Google searches for them, unless you can determine that a huge number of people are interested in a particular thing, it would be hard to make the case that this is viable. Mm-hmm. And so, here's what I would say to you right off the bat, because typically I can look at something and have a pretty good sense of whether or not it has the potential to be successful in the market. And when you're talking about belly dancing per se, I don't see it as something viable to sell unless you were able to frame it or talk about it in a way that was more relatable to the general public or the consumer at large. And what I mean by that is if you were to say that you were going to do a series of instructional videos that were for women who are wanting to find a different way of doing an exercise routine, belly dancing could be the new yoga or the new whatever that thing is that women do. I don't do that kind of workout stuff. Mm-hmm. I do different things. So, but you know what I mean, where it's just now another form of fitness. And then you talk about all of the ways that, the body is being used and the muscle groups and all these different things and the kind of results that you would get as a result of using this form of exercise versus all of the others. And you could do a comparison between, when you do belly dancing, these are the kind of benefits you get versus these other things that are only going to give you these benefits. It's kind of like doing a comparison between weight loss programs and finding the one that really is the true and new alternative to all the old and tired that everyone has seen already. Mm-hmm. And so you could also frame it in terms of belly dancing as a sport or as sport. Mm-hmm. Because if you can talk about this in a way that people have never thought of before, you will actually be enticing people who'd never thought about belly dancing into considering this as a new activity that they might want to engage in. And the biggest challenge will be, well, how do you talk about it that's going to pique people's interest? And we can get into that in just a second. Mm-hmm. Now, my instincts tell me that the public at large is not going to be interested in belly dancing because what they picture is this super skinny woman in not very many clothes that, the guy that they've gone to the Greek restaurant or wherever it is that they typically see a belly dancer. I don't know, or a Moroccan restaurant. I don't know where the fuck they are. Right?
Yeah.
So, and so, gee, isn't that great? That woman's feeling really good about not being in shape like the belly dancer. And there's, boyfriend or husband just, fawning all over her, trying to pretend that he's not. And, of course, I'm being overly
I know
exaggeratic here, if you will. But but when you think about it, just like any other product, is there anything inherent in it that would cause the consumer to say, yeah, not so great, or yeah, not feeling it, or yeah, not for me? And if you can identify the things about this particular thing you'd like to sell that create automatic barriers for people where it instantly raises objections by virtue of what it is, mm-hmm. then that means you have to overcome those objections when you're presenting it to people. And my initial thought is, if you're planning to do this and you think, okay, I want to at least put this thing out there, if you could actually call it something other than belly dancing, let's say you gave it you made up a name for it, mm-hmm. as if it were this pre-existing form of dance that was associated with tremendous physical benefits and health benefits for people, or some crap like that, mm-hmm. where they're not instantly pre-programmed to think about that this is belly dancing and all that evokes in them, mm-hmm. which for many women is going to evoke a lot of, I won't say negative emotions, but feelings of some discomfort, because, no woman who's, 5 pounds over the weight of the belly dancer she's looking at is going to feel good about that.
Right. So it brings up feelings of inadequacy, right, from the beginning.
Yeah. Exactly. And the last thing you want to do is, present something to the consumer that reinforces their feeling of inadequacy right off the bat. I mean, you're dead in the water right there.
Right.
And, so it is in the nature of what it is that you have to offer that could be problematic for you. Mm-hmm. But, my feeling about everything is unless there is, unless I look at something and say, you know what, I can come up with all kinds of ways of selling this shit, but this is one I can't even think of anything. But I've already, suggested to you that there is potential here, but it's all in how you talk mm-hmm. about it. And so if you were, as a takeaway from this conversation, to just start thinking about, okay, well, if we had to rename this whole thing called belly dancing, what would we call it? I mean, think about it for a second. Where did Zumba come from? I mean, Zumba is just, I don't even know what the fuck it is. All I know is that everybody is flocking to these Zumba classes, and it's nothing more than listening to this is what I understand because I've never been there. So who am I to say? I just know Zumba, right? And, women going in there and jumping around and dancing to high energy music, and they get a great workout and all that kind of crap. Well, isn't that what people do when they're listening to music and exercising? It's the same thing, but somebody made gazillions of dollars because they called it freaking mm-hmm. Zumba. Mm-hmm. And so if you were to come up with a fake name like that, maybe it's not fake, I don't know. But if you were to find a word that could capture something that created a feeling in people. I mean, think about the word mm-hmm. Zumba. It starts with Zoom, which automatically conveys a feeling of movement and going fast. And, the letter Z is a powerful letter. And so just in the word itself, you could actually create curiosity and interest and a desire to engage in this mm-hmm. thing. And so I think first and foremost, you need to rename this thing that you do. Now, it's entirely possible after you introduce it, once you've renamed something that's been around for billions of years, I'm sure, is that, people will get into it, and then other people will say, well, that's just belly dancing. And you'll say, yeah, uh-huh.
So. Well, yeah, that's what I'm wondering, because I've had that thought before of just totally creating a new name, because I feel like belly dance is like overplayed at this point. And I feel like a lot of people are probably just tired of it. So I had this idea of creating a new name, but then I wasn't really sure, well, how much do I allude to the belly dance? How much do I talk about it at all then?
I wouldn't talk about it at all. And going back to your point that you just made about, it's overplayed and it's kind of well done and overcooked. Belly dancing as an art form is old. It's really old. And no one has actually brought it into present day thinking where, there are no celebrities going around saying, oh, I joined a belly dancing class. And now 15 million people are charging off to the gym to do belly dancing classes. And, the local Y is now offering belly dancing classes. It's not in the nature of the thing. No one has made it exciting. And because of the provocative nature of it, it's not, in my opinion, it would not be considered, an activity that people would go out of their way to learn how to do. It wouldn't necessarily feel fun because of the provocative nature of it and the fact that so many women are uncomfortable in their skin. And usually that is weight related. So what would have to happen is for you to attract a fairly large audience is that you would have to figure out how you move away from the provocative. And maybe that's something that's an afterthought in the way that you're describing things, but that you move away from the provocative and what some might consider salacious, and you move it into how, let's say there is a woman who is not all that happy with her body, where you talk about it in a way that's going to suggest to her that she can now start feeling about her body in the way that she imagines it might be, but is not yet. Mm-hmm. So that she can feel hope around the possibility that she might have a different body if in fact that's what it is that she desires. I think we all do as women. And so if she feels that, and then what you slip in at the end is something about, and it leaves you feeling more sexy than you felt in years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just something to create that feeling of you meeting a need where what you're doing is you're talking about it in a way where you're addressing a real pain point for your audience or your consumer or your desired consumer. And that is maybe they're not feeling so great about their body. And that, you know, then you reinforce that pain by, you kind of agitate it by suggesting, you know, how many times have you had someone look at you and you feel like they're looking at you up and down with judgment? So you're starting right there where you're stating the problem is that they're not feeling so great about their body. And then you further agitate by suggesting an example of how they feel even, you know, more displeasure or discontent with their bodies. And then you introduce the solution, which would be that this is the kind of thing that in 20 minutes, you can be feeling your body in ways that you've never felt it before. You'll feel better. You'll feel more optimistic. You'll feel more hopeful. You'll feel lighter on your feet. And the best thing is how much more sexy you're going to feel. Mm-hmm. And so basically what you're doing is with words, you're creating or painting an experience for your audience so that, you know, because if they're buying from you online, there's no way to create the experience of it unless you're using words or you're using video. Mm-hmm. And as is often the case when you're presenting an offer to people, it's usually coming in the form of a Facebook ad, which is then sending that traffic over to a website where you're now talking more about that particular activity. And the words that you use to describe these things are critical in defining the experience for them. And you really have to present this as an experience of how it's going to change how they feel in their own skin. And the added bonus is how much sexier they're going to feel as a result. Mm-hmm. And if you're able to change the name and successfully create an experience for your prospects, then I think you have the potential to make something happen here. Because at the end of the day, the activity is the same, whether you call it belly dancing or you call it, you know, frog hopping, whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know. It's the exact same thing. But if you give it a new name, it's just like repackaging. And sometimes, you know, you have to repackage. Think about the Target store. They were kind of the sister to Kmart for decades. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes the dog with the bullseye painted on his eye. And then the red and white bullseye that became the iconic logo for Target. And all of a sudden, Target turned into the coolest place to be shopping. And everybody loves Target. It still has not lost its shine and luster. And all they did was repackage it. They just simply told the consumer, we're different. We're not that anymore. We're this. We're new. And so if you are able to present to the consumer something that is new and different, something they haven't thought of before, something that doesn't reinforce the fact that they're unhappy with their bodies in some way, then you win because you've presented them with a new opportunity that allows them to just forget about everything they ever tried before and now move in this direction.
Right, without necessarily changing the moves themselves, just how I'm talking about it.
Absolutely. And oftentimes, you know, this is classic sales 101. You know, you need the consumer to connect emotionally into that particular product or offering. And if you get them connected emotionally, it will be that much easier to sell to them. But if you talk about this in terms of, you know, more of the left brain logic part of things that, oh, you should do this because, you know, this is a really cool art form. And you don't say anything that they can relate to where you are relating it to them and their experience, there's nothing you can do with this. Now, the thing that I am a little concerned about with this is if you were to do some kind of a training program, if you will, you're selling this only on the internet. And so it would have to be something that they would likely do in their home, because it's not like they're going to be, having these belly dancing studios popping up all over the place. It's just going to be that people are going to learn how to do this stuff in the comfort and privacy of their own homes. And so you'd have to figure out whether the things that you're doing in the moves and the way that you describe them can really be presented as or perceived as like a different kind of workout program, and that you have the intended benefits or the added benefits and all the things that go with it, that this is what people can expect to have happen as a result of engaging with this particular program. And I obviously don't know anything about belly dancing, so you would have to look at how would you construct this in a way that it constituted a workout program that was different from everything else. And you as the expert are the only one who's going to know whether or not that's realistic. The other thing that I'm thinking about is that, you have nothing to lose by floating something out there. And one of the things that people do most often is that they go and develop these full-blown programs with all the bells and whistles before they ever test anything in the market. And for my money and for my own edification, what I would probably do is run a Facebook ad for a couple of days. And excuse me, you would, run that ad at 10 or 20 bucks a day. I mean, you could say, okay, I'm going to invest $100 in trying to figure out whether or not I have an audience. And if you could figure out a desired target audience, and they might be people who've expressed an interest in Zumba or all of these different art forms or dance forms, or exercise programs, you could target all of them. And I mean, even if you were to target Zumba people, although those people are really, they're Zumba addicts. I don't know that they'd move away from Zumba and on into something else, but you could also potentially target weight loss companies like Weight Watchers, and just target or just frame your ad in a way where you're addressing, okay, if I'm targeting people who are interested in Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and all these other things, then you can generally assume the kind of problem that person is having. They're overweight and they're struggling and they're working toward it. You could target that audience and talk about if you're not feeling the best you possibly can or had hoped to in your own skin, here comes frog jumping, and you're going to have the life you always wanted to have because you're now doing frog jumping. You could run a test ad for literally 48 hours to that audience to see whether or not anyone expressed an interest in this. Because if they do, then there's something there. And so you create a Facebook ad and you drive that traffic to a landing page where you would be presenting this new frog jumping program that you have. And I'm using obviously frog jumping as an easy way of saying this is belly dancing, but it's, got clothes on. So, you would then, however you were to write your copy on your landing page, you would be doing it with the sole intent of creating the experience for the person who has clicked on your ad. And if they actually opt in, or you could conceivably set it up where they could buy something. But I think before you even think about what you might be selling to them, I think it would be worth it to just run an ad to test the market to see whether or not there's any interest in this. And if you get people clicking on the ad and you look at the click-through rate on that ad, you will know within a couple of days whether or not this is viable. Because if you get them clicking, meaning your ad is working and it's driving the traffic, it is actually confirming for you that at least among that target audience, there is some interest there. And so
the clicks would be more important than them opting in on the page at that point, because I mean, that could be, that I need to tweak the landing page itself. So yes, the clicks would be the most important part.
Yes. In my opinion, if you have an ad that's working, you definitely are looking at the number of people who are clicking on the ad, because that's telling you, oh, you've got their attention. And now when they get to the landing page, this is where they have to close, or you have to close the deal. And if you're getting the traffic, but you're not getting them opting in, it's because there is either something wrong with the offer you have, or there's something wrong with the way that you are talking about the offer on the landing page. And that then means you have to continue tweaking that landing page. And so you'd run the ad for another couple of days once you've made some changes to the landing page to see if by virtue of changing the messaging, it actually moves the dial in terms of the number of people opting in. So, and what you could do is you could do something as simple as having a Facebook ad that goes to a landing page where you are just talking about that you're in, that this brand new form of, well, not brand new form, that frog jumping is the hottest thing going for people who are struggling with how they're feeling about their bodies. And then to find out more, click here, and then they give up their email address. So you wouldn't actually have to introduce them to the real program, which you haven't created yet. You would just be capturing their email address, and then, you'd send them a follow-up email acknowledging that they had signed up for this, and that to look in their email box in the next couple of days, as they'll be receiving the information then, because then that gives you a couple of days to create something that you can send to them.
Right.
And that's how I would do it, because at this point, obviously you're stuck in the weeds right now, and we need to pull you out of the weeds and give you something actionable that you can take away from here. And so I think that the order of business for you is, number one, you've got to come up with another name. That's essential. And then you have to come up with a way of talking about this that is going to resonate deeply with your audience. And that is all about identifying what they're struggling with, finding examples of how that struggle manifests in their life, meaning, oh, my husband or, my partner doesn't desire me anymore. And it's because, my body is this or that, or whatever it is. And then you're talking about how this newly named form of belly dancing is going to enable them to overcome the feelings they have about their body today and move them into a place where they're feeling better and happier and sexier, and life just got a whole lot better as a result.
Right.
And then you create your Facebook ad that is based on everything that you've just put together right there. And you send them to a landing page where you, just talk a little bit about this thing, or you just say that, frog jumping is the hottest thing going for people who are not feeling so great about their bodies. Click here to find more. And then you're capturing email addresses at that point. That will actually answer the question of whether or not this is something that you can pursue for a living. Because if there is enough interest there, then what you're doing is you could then send those people to a webinar. I mean, you could send those people to a webinar right after they're clicking on the ad. And it could be a brief webinar where you're just introducing them to this whole new thing called XYZ. You're not doing any teaching. You're just emphasizing how, by virtue of doing these simple moves, it translates into a feeling of, you have more of a sense of well-being in your life. And it really comes down to doing something that's really fun and, leaves you feeling so sexy at the end of it. And wouldn't it be great to feel like you have that sex appeal again? And sometimes it's just about how you move. And this is going to help you understand how to move in life so that you can have that feeling. And so, you could ultimately create your program on the fly if you realize that, yes, there is an audience here. And then all you do is, or an audience that's interested. And then all you do is you just increase your Facebook ad spend. And now this is how you scale that thing to get more people potentially clicking and then ultimately buying what it is that you have to offer.
Wow. I just had like an epiphany, because it's everything that I've been like reading about throughout the years, but you basically just distilled it in 20 minutes, which is like, basically, I don't have to create anything at this point. Right now, I'm just trying to solve their problem or capture their interest, in the sense that I'm going to create a transformation for them, but I'm not creating anything. I'm just testing the market at this point.
Yeah, you're absolutely. What you're trying to tease out, if you will, is whether or not there is an audience that would respond to you talking about this frog jumping in a way that made them feel this could be transformative for them. Because really what you're trying to do is this is not about teaching people how to do belly dancing. You have to look at it in terms of, how is this going to transform their life? And this is the way it is with most anything that you're teaching people. You're teaching people something because they have a particular problem. And if you actually solve that problem for them, they are actually transformed and they think you're a genius. And that's what it comes down to. Your goal needs to be, how can you transform them? And for the most part, unless it's a technical thing, like learning how to use a computer software program, for the most part, what needs to be transformed in people is the way that they look at themselves or how they feel about themselves. And the activity that you are selling them is simply the vehicle to help them change the way they see themselves or feel about themselves. That's what you're really selling here. You're selling them a better version of themselves.
Right. And I mean, absolutely. And the interesting thing too, as we're talking, my other big takeaway is that, the first thing you identified was, if you're going to have any success with this at all, you have to mainstream it. And the irony is that is what Zumba did. They basically took all these different dance styles, Latin dance, and mainstreamed it and made it approachable for everybody. And the irony is that they do belly dance in Zumba.
There you go.
They made it approachable.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the key. They made it approachable. And belly dancing, as it stands today, for all the reasons I listed at the outset, it is why it's not accessible to people. It's actually quite, forgive the expression, but it's actually quite off-putting to a lot of women, especially because it just reinforces that they are not the woman who's up there doing the dancing.
Right. And that was my other big takeaway, is that if this were to be successful, if this has a chance of being successful, I have to eliminate any association that people have with belly dance. Basically, I need to take out any association with it. I don't have to call it that at all. They're just moves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. I mean, you could create a whole new industry out of, Bikram yoga poses. You go through the 26 poses. Well, what if you just called it, I don't know, fluorescent yellow poses or something? I don't know. Some ridiculous, you come up with a new name and it happens to be the exact same thing. But if people feel that they can just put away all their past failings because they've tried something and it didn't work, like every weight loss program everyone tries, if you can get them to look away from that and look at what you have to offer, because it represents a completely new way of doing things, even though it's the same freaking yoga poses that they do at a Bikram studio, you're golden, because you've enabled them to forget about the fact that they failed in the past. You're not reinforcing any bad feelings. They get off the hook. You're letting them off the hook. And now they're on their way doing something else that now they actually believe can work for them. Because you've enabled them to stop looking at all of their failings and look at what you have to offer as, oh yeah, well, I've tried everything already. Why am I going to try something else? It's never going to work for me.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, really, it doesn't even matter what it's called. Nobody owns belly dance anyways. There's no
Exactly.
intellectual property with belly dance, so
Mhm.
it's not about that. It's really what I've always been passionate about is, yes, how it makes me feel. That's why I love the
Mhm.
dance. So if there's a way that I can, if I can teach that or communicate it in a way so that other people are experiencing what I'm experiencing.
Yeah, because everything about the dancing for you is how it makes you feel.
Right.
And that is an emotion. It's not the moves. It's the result of the moves that enable you to feel the way that you feel as a result of doing it, which then translates into or then manifests itself in how you feel about yourself in general in life. Because the better we feel physically, the better we feel mentally and emotionally. And I just had a thought that, I mean, you could joke around with this and say, you could say something like, make your belly fat work for you. Lead with that belly fat. You hate your belly fat. Well, guess what? It's going to pay off for you now, or just something where, because come on, as women age and, it's probably not much past their mid-20s unless they're in super physical shape. We are all starting to gain that belly fat. It's just the nature of women. Yeah. It's where we store it. And it's the one thing that we all hate because it creates the love handles on the side. And then the worst part is that the older you get, you actually start shrinking. And so it's not like you can ever escape your belly fat and your love handles because you're fucking shrinking. And now it's just like all collecting there, and it collects and collects. I had my first experience of this year, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Yeah. I used to be so thin. What the fuck? And now all of my weight has just landed in my belly.
Yeah, it's like a switch. You're like, it just, all of a sudden you notice something changed.
Yeah. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it. And it's just like, I'm going to go do some aerial yoga or get one of those, decompression machines where you hang upside down. Or I'm going to apply to go into space where it can make me taller for at least a year, so then I can make my belly fat go away.
Right. Yeah, it's like, whose body is this?
Yeah, exactly. And so, you could do something, like get command of that belly fat, make it your own, make it behave,
make it into a benefit.
Do what you tell it to do. There's all kinds of things that you could do to play around with this and make it fun. But, my even introducing that is to just sort of loosen you up around the whole idea of how you are thinking about this, to see how creative you can get with it, which means you just are thinking about it in completely different ways, which is what we did right at the outset of this conversation. And that was to say, okay, stop thinking about it in terms of belly dancing. Let's see how we can turn it into something, as you say, that we can take mainstream, because ultimately you can have a product or business that is offering something to a niche market, but that niche market has to be big enough that you can actually, scale the business, meaning generate enough revenue off of that audience that it truly is a viable business that can be profitable and can support you, which is why it's always better to go mainstream if you've got a hook or an angle. And like you said, that's exactly what the Zumba people did. And so there's no reason that you couldn't do this same thing. The advantage that the Zumba people have is they've got very deep pockets, and they're doing this in physical locations. And so with that being the case, this then means this is going to be an individual endeavor for women primarily, I'm assuming. So it's going to be an individual endeavor. And that means you have to figure out, okay, there's not going to be that camaraderie that happens when you're in the dance class with all the other people and the kind of energy that's created there. And so you actually are going to have to create that energy for them. And it really just comes with how you talk about this whole thing. It's never...
And create an online community around it.
Oh, absolutely. And if you're creating an online community around it, it really would have to be all about how you transform the way you look at yourself and how you feel about yourself, a lot of which is determined by how we feel about our bodies.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Which then leads you, and the advantage of this, and this is something you should really think about, Jennifer, is that a lot of times when we start doing something, our thinking stops with that one thing. We don't actually look at it as a springboard to something else. And my feeling has always been with everything that I've ever either invented or created and brought to market is that I just was going to let the market tell me exactly what it was they wanted and needed, and I was going to follow their lead. And in doing that, I have been infinitely more successful and more financially successful because, I followed the lead of the consumer who told me everything I needed to know about what they wanted, and then I gave them what they wanted instead of defining for them what they should have. And so what is often the case is that you will create this one thing with, the no longer called belly dancing product, and it will turn into something else because you will start getting feedback in your private community of women who start talking about something. And there are so many of them talking about the same thing that you will see an opportunity to create yet another product that can meet that particular need. And it could be something completely unrelated to the dancing. You just never know. I mean, it could be mixtapes. It could be, it could be meditation tapes. It could be any number of things. But what you're doing is you are actually coming into the market where there is a conversation taking place. And the way that you get into that market is by bringing something to it. So you actually have an opportunity to have a conversation and engage with that audience of consumers. And you give them something that they will find of value or feel is valuable. And then they now know you and they trust you and they look forward to whatever else it is that you're going to bring to them. And you never know what it's going to be. So you never plan out into the future what this product is going to be, because invariably every product that comes to market morphs into something else necessarily, because it morphs because the consumer is demanding that it morph. Otherwise, they're not going to buy the product anymore. Right. And so you have to respond to what the market is telling you. And so as you go forward with this plan and you begin testing out your idea of whether or not this will work, I think that if you just stay focused on, don't try and drink from a fire hose or eat the elephant whole, just nibble on the elephant's tail and see what kind of feedback you get from this big elephant that's out there. And then you'll know what your next move is, because it may be that they're not actually interested in belly dancing. They're interested in something else that you can actually give them. So you don't want to go very far into this with developing anything, because you don't actually know what the market wants. So why would you invest any time in creating something when you don't know what the market's going to say? And when you do finally create something, you give them the minimum. It's the minimum viable product. It's the minimum thing that will enable you to sell to them. You don't give them all your bells and whistles the first time you come to market, because then you're not going to have anything else to sell them. There's no second generation of this thing.
Right.
So you always have to be mindful of that, because, the hardest customer to get is the first one. And, once you have a number of customers, they are the easiest people to sell to, because they've already demonstrated that they're interested in what you have to offer, because they made that commitment upfront to buy that product. Well, that's your easiest sale going forward. And the question will be, what is it that you're coming to market with next? Is it just the second generation of the thing you did first? Or is it, going to be something brand new?
So you're advising against creating that value ladder right from the get-go.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that, for most marketers, digital marketers in particular, and people who are involved in sales funnels and stuff, that everybody says, oh, you need to create your value ladder. Well, it's actually just a mechanism to enable you to see all the potential that this initial product has. Meaning, okay, if I offer this product, it will then get people interested in that, and that makes them potentially open to this other thing at a higher price. And then you keep working them up the value ladder, which is simply offering different products at a higher price. And so in my way of thinking, yeah, you can go ahead and create that value ladder, but every single value ladder I've ever created has not worked because the market said something other than what I thought they were going to say, and I'm going to follow the market. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind about these value ladders. It's very easy for people in online sales, particularly digital sales of online training programs, for them to talk about value ladders. Well, they work the best when you have a warm audience because that audience has already bought from you. And if you've got an email list of 300,000 people, well, yeah, you've got a value ladder because you're going to try and sell everything but the kitchen sink to those same 300,000 people. So that means you have to have other things in the pipeline that get increasingly more expensive. But for someone who's coming to market for the very first time with something, how can you possibly know what that value ladder is, what those additional offerings might be, unless the market gives you some feedback?
That makes a lot of sense.
And so, you're doing this first thing as a way of generating interest and starting to build your email list, because that way you can start getting some feedback and direct engagement with those consumers who are on your email list. And then you can simply ask them, what they're interested in. And this is what I do with, my clothing company is every time I'm thinking about introducing a new product, I don't go out and develop it. I actually go out to all of I think I have 10,000 Facebook fans, and maybe it's 11,000, I don't know, on that particular Facebook page. And I just say, hey, everybody, I've been thinking about doing the following. What do you think? And I swear to God, it's like a freaking stampede of people giving their opinions. And it's nothing could be more validating because they're telling you exactly what they want. And if you're listening to them, they're going to buy it when it actually is real.
Right. Totally. Makes so much sense.
So there you go. You think you have an action plan you can work with here?
I seriously got more in that 47 minutes than the clarity that I've had up until this point. So thank you. Absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. Well, the clarity is the one thing that's hardest to get, because when we get stuck in the weeds, we're just grasping for straws, trying to find anything that can help us get clear. And then the problem is we go in the direction of cluttering everything up, and then we're totally fucked. There's just nowhere for us to turn because we don't even know what we're looking at anymore. And then we get even more confused. And then what most people do is they buy some online training program because they think that the answer is embedded within that online training program, when in fact, what you truly need to do is back away from the whole thing and get back up to the 30,000 foot level and say, okay, what am I actually looking at here? Let's start over again. Let's reboot with this idea and figure out, okay, what do I actually have here? And is this realistic? Because when people get stuck in the weeds, they're screwing around trying to figure out what kind of website page, what kind of Facebook ad and all this kind of crap. And none of that is actually helping them get to market because they haven't clearly defined what their product is or what their offer is. But most important, they have done no investigation or research into whether or not anyone has an appetite for this. Because at the end of the day, what you want to do is poke as many holes as you can in your idea and see whether or not it's still floating. Because if it floats with that many holes in it, it means you've got something viable, or it has the potential to be viable. But what unfortunately happens for most people who have an idea is that they've got this idea, they get all excited about it, and they don't want any naysayers. This causes the biggest disputes among couples, is that somebody comes up with an idea and the spouse asks one question about it, and then they end up having this huge argument. It's like, you're not supporting me, and you've never believed in anything that I want to do, and I'm just going to go do this. And they have their, they go and have a little hissy fit, when in fact all that person was trying to do, they saw something that was obviously problematic. But the originator of the idea is so invested in their idea and is so sure that this is going to work because, of course, for them it's going to work, but you are not the customer. The customer is the customer. And they always say something contrary to what you would think they would say. Because consider this. You ever hear of the chia pet?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, explain to me how that ever came to market. I mean, there is no fucking explanation for the existence of chia pets.
Right.
And yet it probably did $1 billion in business because it's so stupid.
Yeah.
And yet everybody had a freaking chia pet because they just wanted to see shit grow out of tiny little holes in a terracotta pig. I mean, really? Seriously? And yet, sure enough, everybody and their brother buying a freaking chia pet.
Right. So it's like you're saying create as many minimum viable products as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And just throw them against the wall and see if they stick. Mm-hmm. And don't be attached to any one thing, because if you get so attached to something being one way, you're actually eliminating every other opportunity that might present itself if you just pivoted a little bit, or if you just tweaked it, or if you just called it something else, or you did something a little different with it, or you went after a different audience. But people are so fixed and controlling about their idea being, this is the thing, this is what it's going to be, and this is what I'm coming to market with, that they're shooting themselves in the foot. And this is how people lose all their money, because they're being stupid about this shit.
Mm-hmm. And they get attached.
Oh, absolutely. And the reality is if you had an idea in the first place, which most people don't, if you had an idea in the first place and it doesn't work, you can't possibly believe that you aren't going to ever have another idea again in life. I mean, seriously? Are you that short-sighted? Are you so lacking in ideas that there was only one be-all and end-all fucking idea in life? I mean, you need to go have your head examined if you've only got one idea in there, because you know what? If you've used up the idea, you may as well kick the bucket now, because you aren't going to do anything else in life.
Right.
Come on.
And then you're not open-minded anymore. Yeah,
exactly. And then you're fighting with everybody around you because you think that they're not being supportive of you. It's like, go fuck yourself.
Right. Yep. That sums it up.
All right. So do you have any last questions before we wrap this up?
There were so many takeaways in there. I'm just glad this is a podcast and I could listen to it over again.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll just be able to press rewind and say, okay, what was that? Okay, I got to write this down.
There were so many gems in there. I'm just glad that I can listen to it over and over again.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So much. That was so helpful. I can't even tell you.
Oh, brilliant. Well, definitely, let me know as you get this thing underway. Let me know what things are looking like. And if you actually maybe what we'll do is we'll have a follow-up episode where you come back and you talk about all of what you did and what the results were, because there's always learning to be had through people who are trying something and they discovered this and they ran into this problem. They thought this was going to happen. And then, oh my God, what about this? And I never expected this. I mean, watching someone go through that process or hearing them talk about the process they went through is really helpful to people who are on the same journey as you are. So I think we should definitely schedule a follow-up episode after you've had a chance to go out and test this. So, well, thank you so much, Jennifer. This has been so delightful.
Thank you so much, Arlene. So appreciate it.
I'm Arlene Battishill. Thanks for listening. I'll be back with another episode. Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen, but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battishill, and I want to know, what's your next move?